Riot's latest lab is called Bestow, where a random ally in your hand gains the stats of any unit that dies on your side of the field. You choose from one of 6 pre-constructed decks that revolve around killing your units in various ways to get the Bestow stat effects. In this video I will rank the Bestow decks from worst to best. At number 6 is Notin but Powder Monkeys, which consists of cards from Bilgewater and Piltover and Zorn, featuring Vi as the deck image. This deck is simply very hard to play, but from time to time you'll be able to pull off all the synergies this deck has to storm to victory. The main plan of your game is to grow a big Fizz or Prowling Cutthroat. Fizz is probably your big win condition in this deck, as elusives are rare in this game mood and can easily hit the opponent's nexus for huge damage. Try to keep Fizz in your hand to buff long enough to attack and one-shot. Try also to have 2 spells at burst speed in the hand to protect him from removal. This deck is the closest thing to a controlling combo deck when compared to the others. Use 1 mana cost synergy from Professor Von Yip, Double Trouble, and Petty Officer, and this deck seems to summon a massive amount of tokens and buffs to pass on with the Bestow mechanic. While Monkey Idol may not be the best payoff card to receive its own Bestow effects on, it's one of the better enablers since it has the potential to pass on 6/9's worth of stats if it takes its natural course in summoning 3 Powder Monkeys. Devourer of the Depths can be a game-winning card if you either bestow it enough or hit a massive bestowed enemy unit with its effect. The Devourer skill is considered an obliterate, which doesn't actually trigger the stat passing on mechanic upon death of Bestow. If you have Vi in your opening hand, it's fair to consider keeping her due to the nature of the Bestow getting her to 10 attack very easily. Leveling her up is much easier since you don't have to play 8 cards like you normally do in a natural game. This deck seems fun on paper, but it's just a bit too clunky to make it work, and gets easily countered by the other decks in this game mood. For example, a flash freeze on a maxed Fizz delays your win condition for another turn. It's still a very fun deck to play, so you get a lot of satisfaction using it, especially when you can pull off those combos, and this is why it appears number 6 on my list. At number 5 is Take the Initiative, which consists of cards from Bilgewater and Demacia, featuring Quinn as the deck image. While the list follows the playstyle of the popular Quinn Misfortune list in the ladder, this pre-constructed lab deck isn't powerful enough when compared to other options. This deck is pretty underpowered, but there's still a few nice tips and tricks you can pull away with to try and steal some games. The key card in this deck is Misfortune, so mulligan everything away except her if you don't already have her in your plan, so then if you do have her, then curve as normal. Quinn is pretty underpowered even in the standard game mood, so you shouldn't care too much about her. Use cards like Grizzled Ranger and Island Navigator to beat down opponents with Tempo and Scout to get multiple attacks off each turn. The fact they summon multiple units is great in Bestow, as it can be an easy way of getting more cards to die, which in turn will buff cards in your hand. Outside the usual strategy, Prowling Cutthroat is a powerful payoff card to receive all the buffs on since it is elusive and can sneak past opponents in their late game after enough units have died. Sometimes you can even chase a win from your opponent with a large enough board by attacking twice with Relentless Pursuit. Number 4 is Noble Sacrifice, which consists of cards from Demacia and Shadow Isles featuring Callista as the deck image. This deck uses a Retribution archetype card packages from both of these regions. While the payoff cards and keywords in this pre-constructed deck aren't as powerful on average when compared to the other cards on the list, there's some fantastic synergy which I'm going to describe now. The amount of synergy comes from cards that require units to die, like Vanguard Redeemer, Dawn Speakers, Callista, and Lucian. As a deck is built around death, these are more powerful since you consistently activate them. On top of this, you can take advantage of the Bestow death bonus to take this one stage further in terms of your winning conditions. A good thing about this deck is the amount of pressure it can put early on. A very early leveled up Lucian can make you take a very easy and fast game. Callista will add more stats to the board. Alone she may not be the strongest, but when she summons dead allies, these will actually keep the stat buffs from when they died before, leading to some crazy combos. there's one really powerful card to look out for when drawing due to its doubling effect, Silver Ring Vanguard. Since they summon an exact copy of themselves, holding onto it until it gets a massive bestowed up effect can be game ending. Additionally, when they die, they effectively give double bestow stats to the next set of units in your hand, so you're going to get this huge bestow bonus twice. So the amount of value here can overwhelm an enemy opponent and effectively win you the game. This deck's not higher on the list as it lacks way to escape the traps and mechanics your opponent may use, therefore causing the game to take much longer than it needs to, and effectively it was the opposite intention of this deck. Also, it lacks proper removal and relies heavily on combat to take units out, which most of the time is a trade at the cost of a unit and spell just for an opponent's unit, or say a 1-for-1 but trading for a weak unit from your opponent, but it's still a very fun and viable deck. At number 3 is Scar Tissue, which consists of cards from Riot and Noxus, featuring Vladimir as the deck image. This deck is a nice balance of aggression, synergy and value. The aggression comes from units which get bigger every time they survive damage, and their attacks pass on units in hand to continue the threat. While Scar Tissue is an unremarkable deck compared to the other 5 on this list, there's a couple of ways of finding success with it. A turn 1 Omen Hawk can leave you having a nice early tempo lead by effectively getting a 2-2 buffs to spread around. Iceveil Archer allows you to frostbite a powerful enemy on turn when it may attempt to kill you, so this serves as a powerful counter to the strongest ephemeral deck on this list. Synergy comes from cards on your list which enable those effects, such as Ember Maiden and Crimson Awakener. The value comes from the cards that generate cards such as Crimson Curator, or units with regeneration, which in this game mood are literally overpowered. This deck runs 3 cards with regeneration. The highest among these decks are 2, which are also champions, Braum and Vladimir. It also has removal in the form of Flash Freeze, which denies the Bestow attack going to other units in the hand, as it effectively dies with 0 attack. This is absolutely insane later on in the game. Ultimately, while this deck has multiple fun tools to work with, the entire deck's playstyle, having minions survive damage, is the opposite style of what this lab's for, when minions should be dying. If you build a board that's wide enough in a late game, a surprise pack mentality can definitely end the game with unsuspecting opponents. Overall, this is an all-round deck, but lacks ways to escape the board state, which is very important to win in this game mood. But more importantly, to counter decks with those units, as effectively a board can be massive, but still lose to a well-buffed elusive unit if you don't have a Flash Freeze in your hand, for example. This is why it takes 3rd on this list. At number 2 is Pile of Poros, which consists of cards from Freljord and Piltover Zorn, featuring Sejuani as the deck image. This deck is very synergy focused and has a lot of great tools to get you ahead of your opponent. Tricks like Take Heart and Poro Snack are a great way to start the game, as effectively these will help you with trades early on to have more blockers and attackers overall. On top of that, it's very easy to get a huge elusive unit thanks to Daring Poro and Heart of the Fluffed. Also again, Braum is simply the best champion in this mood, as he has 2 of the best keywords in the game, and the only drawback is that he needs to be buffed, which in this game is the easiest thing in the world. This deck is also very powerful because it has multiple ways to frostbite enemies both offensively and defensively. If you can manage to find a way to use your massively powered up unit from Bestow to destroy an enemy unit that has frostbitten or vulnerable, then you can deny a huge bunch of stats being passed on to future units. For example, Flash Freeze denies the attack given to a unit in the hand because it effectively dies with 0 attack. So killing a unit with lots of attack using Flash Freeze is literally the game winning combo, so the same as the one I discussed on the last deck. If you can plan around your Bestow chain accordingly, you'll eventually end up with an Overwhelm Enhanced, Heart of the Fluff, Sejuani, or Scar Maiden Reaver, and finished off the game in one mighty punch, and that's why it's number 2 on this list. At the number 1 top spot is Certain Death, which consists of cards from Iona and Shadow Isles, featuring Hecarim as the deck image. This is by far the best pre-constructed deck in this lab format, which perfectly matches the weakness of ephemeral units, losing temper and stats when dying after combat, and makes it into a strength. Besides having access to the best keywords to combine with the Bestow mechanic, elusive, this deck also has multiple ways of spawning endless units, which can further buff permanent units like Shark Chariot and Silent Shadowblade. Think about Shadow Fiend. It's a completely busted as a 1-drop, and it's only balanced because he dies after striking in the same way a normal ephemeral unit would be. But now think about what it does in this game mode, where you get to keep those stats on another unit in its hand. Likewise, Z is broken, as it's already what's somewhat viable in the standard format to buff him, and his stats will also be moved on to his Living Shadow, basically doubling his stats. With Bestow, it's very easy to accomplish that. On top of that, so the Living Shadow further buffs other units in their hand, so there's just this huge kind of cycle going around of buff, and Z will effectively help you snowball this game away really quickly. There's some fantastic cards in this deck. So Hecarim can allow you to go wide and further buff all your ephemeral units for more stats. Silent Seeker is simply an elusive card that will basically be able to hit the opponent's nexus for huge damage. And Shadow Mark for the removal of the elusive on your cards that you want to stay on the field. So there's so many different combos. King Cowl Lifeblade, it's one of the most powerful cards that can be bestowed buffs in this format. With both elusive and lifesteal, this can threaten to one-shot your opponent and save you, and heal you back to nearly full health, if not full health, preventing you from dying outside of other one-shots. True to the name, players wielding this deck will bring certain death to any opponent if they can pilot it perfectly. Most of the time, this deck will be unbeatable, and that's why it's number 1 on this list. Once again, I could not have done this video without Bomber TV. He tried and tested every deck before putting this list together for me, so please check him out. He's a Masters tier player, and I'll actually be featuring on his channel. Some of his videos will even build on what I cover on my channel. I want to know which Bestow deck you had the most luck with. What do you think's the strongest, and what do you think's the weakness? Remember to like and subscribe. See you next time, guys.